Okay, so in the last video, we left off deleting our app folder. So we're going to recreate that now. So let's go into the root and create a folder called app. And then let's first create our layout file. Now, with pages / React components, you can call them either, you can use .js, you can use JSX, you can use, if you're using TypeScript, TS, and you can use TSX. Now, we're using JavaScript, we're not using TypeScript, and I prefer to use JSX. Okay, so that's what I'll be using, but again, you can use JS as an extension. So in our layout, this is a React component just like any other React component. So I'm going to just use my snippets extension, which is, just to remind you, I mentioned this in the setup video, but this right here, ES7 Plus, React Redux, React Native Snippets. With that, we can use, for instance, RAFCE, which is React Arrow Function component with an export at the bottom. So that's what I like to do. That's how I like to format my components. So if I do that, you'll see it gives me an arrow function component with the export at the bottom, which is what I want. All right, now as far as what you want to name this layout component, you can call it anything. I'm going to call it main layout, so I'm going to just select all these and just say main layout. All right, so I'll go ahead and save that. Now, if I reload the page, you can see main layout. So this is basically the entry point to our application as far as our file and our folder and file structure goes. Now, we do want to wrap, since this is the layout, we want to wrap this return with HTML tags. So I'm actually going to put this in some parentheses here, like that, and then let's wrap this div in, let's say, HTML. We're going to add a lang attribute and set that to en. Okay, and then we'll move this div up into that HTML. And then let's also wrap it with body. So we have our body tag, wrap that. All right, so if I save that and then we come over here and let's take a look at our source, you can see we have our HTML tag. It also will put the head tag in. We don't need to add that. And then any meta tags, which I'll show you how we can add those as well. But yeah, so that is just our base layout. Now, as far as creating the pages and having them show in the layout, those are going to come through a prop that's passed into here called children. So we're going to destructure the prop and we're going to take out children, and then I'm going to replace this main layout text here with children. Now, if I do that, we're going to get a 404, and you notice we get these custom 404 pages by default. And I'm going to show you how we can create our own as well. But the reason it's doing this is because there is no page to display, right? We deleted everything. So let's go into our app folder and let's create a new file. And we're going to call this page. And again, you can use JS or JSX. I prefer JSX. And this is going to be our home page. And you can see it's actually trying to load it, but there's no export. So it's giving us an error. So again, let's create a React component. I'm going to call this home page and save that. And now we can see home page. And this is file-based routing. The reason that this is showing up as the home page is because it's directly in the app folder, which is basically the new pages folder. And we called it page.jsx. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to create subfolders so that we can create different routes, but I'll get to that in a minute. Right now, we want to make sure we add our styling back because notice Tailwind is not being integrated anymore. So before, when I deleted the app folder, it had a globals CSS file in it. We could put it back here, but I prefer to keep it outside of the app folder. Basically, I just use the app as our pages, our page components, and our API routes. For any like regular UI components like a search box or something like that, I would put outside of the app folder in a components folder, which we'll create in a little bit. But right now, let's create a folder called assets in the root outside of the app folder. All right, and then in assets, we'll create another folder and let's call that styles. And then in there, we're going to create a new file called globals.css. And this is where we want to add our Tailwind directives. So we can do that with 3 lines. We want to do at Tailwind base and at Tailwind components and at Tailwind utilities. Okay, so we'll add those 3 lines, and then any custom CSS you have, you can put in here as well. Now it hasn't taken effect because we need to import this into our layout. So let's go into our layout and let's say import. And then from here we can use the alias, which is the @ symbol. So basically the @ is just means the root of your directory. So we want to go into assets in our root. So now we'll say @/assets/styles and then /global CSS. And now if I save that, you can see the font's changed. Now there's no margin or padding. So now the styles are being used. Now the last thing I want to do in this layout file is add some metadata. So since our pages are they're server side by default, right? So this page, the home page and the layout, these are React components that are on the server. Okay, when you create a component, unless you put use client at the top, which I'm going to get to in a couple of videos from now, it's rendered on the server, which means that we can actually have some good SEO. We can have descriptions and titles and keywords, and the search engines will actually pick it up. Now, there's a couple ways to do it. The main way, or the easiest way, is to simply come down, and you can do this in the layout, which will affect all pages, but then you can go into each individual page and add it there as well. So we want to do an export of a variable called metadata, and we're going to set that to an object, and then we can add in any meta tags we want, such as a title, because right now, if you look, it just says localhost, right? Let me just make that a little bigger. It says localhost 3000. So for the title, I just want it to be, let's say, property pulse, and then we'll just do like a line, and then we'll say, let's say, find the perfect rental for the title. All right, so if I save that, you'll see right away it changes. All I have to do is export this metadata. And then if I wanted to add description, I could just add right here, let's say description, and I'll just say the same thing, just find your dream rental property. So now if I come over here and I look at the source, let's do a line wrap, we should see, you can see the titles right here, and then there should be a meta tag with, yeah, right here. So meta name description, content, find your dream rental property. And if I were to put keywords in here, let's say keywords, we'll say rental, I don't know, find rentals, find properties, and if we come back over here, now we should see the keywords. Yep, right here, meta. That's the description. Right here, keywords, and then we have our comma separated values. All right, so it's as easy as that. And then if you wanted to change it for just the home page, you could come up here and you could say export const metadata and set that to an object, title, and let's just say test. And if I save that, now just the home page has the test title. But I'm going to get rid of that because I'm just going to use the global title and keywords and stuff. All right, so I think this is a good place to stop before we get into file-based routing. One thing that I'm going to do, and I would suggest you do, is to push your code to a repository. In the end, we're going to be deploying this to Vercel, and we need to import our GitHub repository in order to do that. So make sure you have Git installed. I'm just going to open up a new terminal here, new Z Shell terminal, and I still have my server running in this one. And then I'm just going to go ahead and say git. Actually, let's check out the git ignore that we have here. So by default, this should have everything in it that we need. Obviously, we don't want to push the node modules folder or DS store. One thing I'm going to add in here is just .env because this doesn't pick it up for some reason. So I'm just going to add .env which is it's going to be where we have our environment variables later on. And I think that's all I want to put in here. So yeah, so let's go ahead and run git add all, or you could just use the integrated source control as well, but I like to use the terminal. So we'll say git add all, git commit, and let's say what do we got here? We'll say create or created layout, homepage, and styles. Okay, so I'm going to set up my GitHub repo and stuff off camera. You guys should know how to do that. If not, just go ahead and check out my Git crash course, Git and GitHub crash course on YouTube. And that's it. In the next video, we'll talk a little bit more about file-based routing.